Hi guys, thanks for joining us. I see some folks are still connecting. So we'll get started here in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping notes. For those of you who are not a current member of AWC, or if you need to renew, our fall membership drive is going on now, and it will end October 31st. So anytime in the next couple of weeks, if you'd like to re-up your membership or join us as a member, you get member benefits, which we will put some in the chat throughout the meeting today. We'll get going here. So we have with us the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, who recently started a podcast, or maybe it's been longer. I'm not exactly sure when you started it, but you guys can fill us in on those details. So thank you to Sister Beth Murphy, who's the Communications Director at the Dominican Sisters, Veronica Brown, Communications and Advancement Specialist, Jeremiah Washington, who's our podcast host, and Aaron Tebrinke, who is the podcast editor and sound engineer. Thanks for joining us, guys. I'll be moderating some questions, but this can be an open conversation. Anyone in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to keep an eye on those too. So Sister Beth, why don't we start with you and tell us a little bit about your organization, what's your mission, and what's your role in our community here?
Thanks so much, Sarah, and I'm happy to be with everybody. I'm not going to assume that everybody knows a lot about us, so let's try to give you a good overview of the Dominican Sisters of Springfield. We've been serving Central Illinois and beyond for about 150 years. Our most visible ministries in Springfield are Sacred Heart Griffin High School, Jubilee Farm, our eco-spirituality center out on the west end of town, Old Jack Road, and Cor Unum House, where I live. We have a new ministry for young adult women. For many years, we taught at several local elementary schools, and we still have sisters teaching at St. Patrick and working at Little Flower, Sacred Heart Griffin, and St. Joseph the Worker in Chatham. A handful of our sisters provide pastoral ministry, accompanying people who are elderly or sick at St. John's and at area nursing homes and retirement homes. And then further afield, we have sisters in elementary school and high school administration in Northern Illinois and Missouri. Several of our sisters are deeply engaged in healthcare during this very trying time of COVID in Jackson, Mississippi. Our sisters in Peru, all native Peruvian women, are active in parish and healthcare ministry in Lima and in a rural community in the Andes Mountains. We have two very impactful literacy centers in Northern Illinois, about which a new book has just been written. We're also deeply committed to the work of becoming anti-racist and are known for that locally in Springfield. So all of us are learning what it means to be actively anti-racist and are allies and co-conspirators with BIPOC people wherever we minister in the world, including South Dakota, Missouri, Mississippi, Arizona, and Peru. In addition to all that, the Dominicans, the Order of Preachers, includes thousands of sisters, nuns, brothers, priests, and lay members around the world. And we are actively working in collaboration with many of them across national boundaries to do things like ending human trafficking, promoting the well-being of the planet, speaking out against the injustices of war, just everyday stuff. And last but not least, the four of us carry on a powerful ministry of extending the gospel through our work in collaboration with about a dozen or so program offices of the Dominican Sisters of Springfield. We publish a well-regarded magazine 3 times a year, and we make our sisters' commitments to the gospel and the more just world present through website, social media, and our latest effort, F.L.O.W, which is why we're here.
That's awesome. It seems like you have a wide geography and a wide array of audiences you're trying to reach. So talk to us about some of the things you mentioned: social, magazine, your website. Those are all kind of tactics that you've probably used in the past to do that. So talk to us about how you got started with the podcast, Aaron. Can I turn that question to you?
Sure. This podcast was an idea that came about around October of 2020. And like Sister Beth said, we do a lot of outreach in social media, videos, all sorts of different mediums, print medium. And this particular thing, it was one of the few times that I've seen everybody jump on board really quickly. And when I say everybody, I mean the entire community of sisters here and all the workers. It was one of those rare moments that everybody really wanted to be a part of this. And it really started from conversations Jeremiah and I had about just technology and trying to figure out new ways to reach out to people. And he was just wanting to learn some stuff. And I know he's an ambitious guy, and he's tried different roles in the building here. And this was one of those times where I just realized that he has such a great presence about him, and makes people feel really comfortable, has a great speaking voice, he's fun, and he's also got like a budding understanding of the sisters because he's been here for a long time. And interviewing sisters is different than interviewing people on the street, because they usually want to talk with, well, they usually want to talk about the people they serve and not so much themselves. And over the years, it's been more challenging to have them talk about themselves and the work they do, just because of the nature of their work. And this, with Jeremiah, he's been able just to get them to tell stories this way, in a new way that really is very personal, very entertaining. Historically, I mean, it's there's so many things we've learned in this process, and this team of 4 is really quite a team to do all the components that are needed for it. So we started in like the very beginning of this year recording things, and it finally came out in pieces, and it's still being done in August. And I think right now it's quite the project. It's really moved everything that we do with communications, as it starts with the podcast, and then we build out from it with all the different types of video and social media. And I'm sure Veronica can tell you about the process. I've got this logo behind me. There, well, you kind of see it. But she created that, and the intent is to reach out to a younger audience. And the whole vision of it is a weekly podcast dedicated to telling stories of people changing lives in hopeful ways for the life of the world. And it's a ministry of the Springfield Dominican Sisters. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's great. Jeremiah, can we hear your side of that too? And then tell us how the pandemic played into your decision to start the podcast.
Yeah, basically, like Aaron was explaining, we was having to talk about just streaming and a lot of stuff. I was doing a lot of online gaming at the time of the idea of him asking me to be the host. And we was talking about, 2K, just games and whatnot. And he said, you can learn how to do all that, and you can learn how to edit videos and a lot of stuff. What do you think about doing a podcast? So at first I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know, podcast. It's not really, I don't have any training in that or nothing. I don't know. And he said, yeah, but the sisters, you've been here for a while. You might as well go ahead and try to just see if it works. And it was like one of the best things I could have done, because now I'm a host for our F.L.O.W cast, and I actually like it. It's really good. It's a new experience for all 4 of us, and life-changing opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Veronica, can you tell us about the different backgrounds that you guys each have within the Dominican Sisters, and how you 4 came to be this dynamic team that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, I've only been with the Dominican Sisters now for about a year, just a little over a year. So I'm still fairly new. So that's kind of one of the good things about our team is that we're all like different levels of, you know, how long we've been here, how much we know about the community and the sisters. So I feel like we've all been able to add a really good and different perspectives to it. And, you know, really, like Aaron said, he's known Jeremiah for a while. Jeremiah knows all the sisters and he's known them for a while. So that background helped. But then I think also having somebody new on the team also has helped, you know, get some of those new ideas, maybe something they hadn't thought of in the past, all that kind of stuff. And also, you know, try and get it to maybe a little bit of a younger audience, a little more modern feel, those kind of things.
So it sounds like you're targeting the younger audience. What goals do you have? Do you have any targets that you're trying to achieve or goals with the podcast, or is it truly just, you know, sharing the stories for whoever happens upon them? Like, what's your philosophy behind the goals there?
So really, especially since this is our first year and this is the first time we've tried anything like this, our main goal is to just spread awareness, you know, just try and reach as many people as we can. We would, you know, our ideal audience would be a younger audience, that kind of thing. But, you know, like I said, especially in the first year, I think just spreading the word that we have a podcast and that, you know, the sisters are involved in something new like this, I think that's the most important part. We've really received some good like email replies and things like that, which to me, that shows just how much someone has engaged with it if they're going to reply to an email, you know what I mean? Things like that. So just kind of keep in mind that, you know, normally in the past, like a lot of projects, you probably use social media and like all those numbers to really like gauge your success. But I think in something like this and something brand new, it's important to keep more of that anecdotal success in mind.
So
If I could just jump in
Yeah.
on that, Veronica's absolutely right. For us sisters, the most important communications medium we have is ourselves and our relationships that we build with the people among whom and for whom we minister. So when we talked about this the other day, we absolutely agreed that engagement with people is our goal. We want to bring people into relationship with us. And I think we're having some success.
So along those lines, how do you choose what topics to cover? Whoever's in charge of choosing topics.
It's usually Sister Beth for the most part, but
Well-
you know, the very first ones I could say, it was just like, Jeremiah knows these sisters, let's go talk to him.
Yeah, we asked him who are his favorite sisters. If he could interview anybody to start, who would they be? And he named 4 sisters. So those were the first interviews that we did that helped him to feel more comfortable because they were people that he knew. And so that's the way we do it. We've done a couple of episodes that are based on thematic things that are coming up in the church. We did one for the Feast of the Holy Rosary, for instance. We just recorded yesterday one that's going to launch the week of Halloween about the feast of the saints in the church. We've got a huge pipeline of things that we can do and no end of expertise among our sisters that we can draw on. So I don't know, anybody else want to add anything to that?
Go ahead, Jeremiah. I see you've got unmute. I was just curious, are you tracking which ones are more popular as you go along? Sorry, I'm right next to the ER here, so you're hearing the sirens.
We do, yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one. We do. So we use Podbean as our host. And so through Podbean, they do have like, you know, some stats, things like that that you can track. So yeah, I would say especially to keep that in mind. Podcasting stats are going to be a little bit different than other stats, especially like when we launch an episode every Thursday, we get a lot of good traction immediately. But then I've also noticed that that same Thursday, we'll get traction, we'll get hits on our past episodes. So it's kind of an ongoing thing. It's not always as immediate as some other things when you share a link to a blog post or things like that. So keep in mind that you're gonna just remind your audience over and over again that you've got these podcasts, that they are going to be there forever and they can listen to them at any time. And that's kind of something to keep in mind as you're sharing them.
That's really interesting because, I'm used to looking at like Facebook or Twitter or whatever, tracking for social. So that's really good, interesting for people who are considering a podcast for either their personal selves or for their organization. So Aaron, do you want to tell us, did you have to work really hard to sell this idea to the sisters, or were they jumping at the bit to try to get on the podcast and get in line?
It actually wasn't too bad. Usually it's one of those things where we have a lot of video work and sisters are hesitant to be in front of the camera. And really a lot of people are, because, cameras they capture every little nuance of your tics and weirdness. But the audio is great because you can have a conversation, and as it goes on, Jeremiah will tell you that that it gets a little easier, and you that's when the really great stuff happens. And there's no time limit. It can be short, it can be long. And when we package things together in a communications way, we have emails that go out, a subscription of people that come in and want to know things about the sisters and programs and such. And so those people get into an email list. We have the social media world that we've created over the years with video and social media in general. And so all of those things get in more and more engagement. And the new people that we are seeing, yes, there are some young people, but it's just a lot of people. And when you go with those statistics, it's different with the Podbean stuff or any of those, because you can't really tell as easily as you can with some of the social media metrics. But what we've been saying here, that these meaningful metrics that we're really looking for, the engagement as in real communication coming back and people building relationships, we can naturally see that. And it goes into the other different types of magazines and any of the other outreach that we have for advancement purposes. That's definitely, it's grown quite a bit. And so you can see that happening, and people are more engaged and they share it and they talk about it, and they, it's really nice to see. And right off the bat, I think the sisters were pretty happy with the concept of getting more and more people involved, and in it, and not just the sisters, it's just the, trying to bring in the community. And that's really, it's just really been a fun experience just to try to come up with these concepts and edit the videos and edit the audio. And I like to do that tedious stuff, so it's great for me.
Talk to us about what challenges you've encountered as you went through this process. So for those of us who may be considering doing a podcast, what challenges did you have, whether it's technical or just trying to figure out how to get started maybe? But that's where I feel like I would be stuck. Like, I don't even know, I could do the interview part, but like logistically, how do you get it somewhere and how does it get out there? So what challenges did you encounter, and how did you overcome those?
I'm going to share the screen really quick just to kind of show you a visual for this, because it would probably help. You probably see this PowerPoint here, and it's got the Podbean and all of these distribution channels. Figuring that out was something very new to all of us. And I shared this presentation with you all. I'll stop there. A little earlier, and so you can see the whole thing. And there's all sorts of stuff in there, stats and, well, not stats, but anything, stuff that might help you figure out. But that was one of those challenges, I'll say. It's all new. You know, the whole thing was, how do you get this to Apple Podcasts at all? And figuring it out from, you know, just a recording in general. I'll say another thing just about a microphone. You know, if you're wanting to start with something, we did invest in a fancy microphone, but you can also use this thing right here. This, you know, these podcasts are really, honestly, they sound great with human voices if you use Zoom. They actually have a compression in there, and I can show you another visual thing just because it's kind of interesting. I'll zip through here. So this, if you see this purple thing in the back here, that's just a normal sound that you can get from anything. And with Zoom, it's already cut out all this fuzzy stuff. So I would use these tools, simple as that. And, you know, Zoom is fantastic. You can use your phone just to start recording things. And one of the other things we all said was, if you're just wanting to do it, jump in it, just start doing it. There's really no reason to not. There's no huge monetary investment if you don't want it to be. So.
Yeah, and I would say always remember that YouTube is your best friend, because if you're wondering, how do I get my podcast listed on Apple Podcasts? Someone else has wondered that, and somebody has already made a 7-minute video on YouTube telling you exactly step by step how to do it. So just remember that everybody has been in that starting place. There are a ton of resources online.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the best things that we did was start recording ahead of the season. So our plan is to push out 25 episodes a year. So 6 months worth, and then have 6 months off where we're not producing new material, maybe repurposing older shows and that kind of thing. That will give us a break and give us time to get caught up. Well, we did that, and we had this wonderful grace period of just getting to enjoy rolling out the podcasts. And now we're at that point where we have to, you know, paddle a little faster to get things going. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. But we're doing it. Getting busy sisters scheduled is a bit of a challenge. And we were talking earlier about, somebody said, well, where do you record? Well, you are looking at one of the recording spaces right here, my office. We've had to move around the building. We've had a few challenges with having to tell the workmen, no, you cannot check the generator between 3 and 4:30 on Wednesday afternoons, because that's when we record, that kind of thing. So we've not had a lot of, you know, general, what am I trying to say? My brain is just going on fade. We have not let our challenges stop us, I guess is what I'm saying. And sometimes I will think that episode was not well recorded or whatever, and I'll say, oh, I don't know how the audio is going to be on that. What we've learned is the audience, if they're engaged, they are really forgiving. So little audio glitches and things like that are not a problem. We learned to go to Zoom for sure if we've got more than 2 voices besides Jeremiah's in the show. We once tried to record a program with 4 people around the microphone. We do not have the setup for that. And actually that was the only recording session we had to throw out completely. So the Zoom helps. I'm a part of a learning cohort. One of the most popular and earliest Catholic Sisters podcasts in the country is something called A Nun's Life. They've been at it for 15 years, something like that. And I'm in a learning cohort with the founder of that group. She has recommended to us an online recording tool called Zencaster. She really swears by it. Now they have a studio that they use for most of their recording, but when they're on the road where they can't get guests in the studio, they use Zencaster. So we didn't have that in our budget for this year. We're going to look at it for next fiscal year to see. It's not terribly expensive, like, you know, $200 a year. But we'll be looking at that and we'll let you know. But from my friends who are using it, they've discovered it's quite helpful and good.
I have one more question, then I see some questions that are coming in the chat. What feedback are you getting? I've heard a couple of side comments about feedback that it's going well. So I'm just curious if you have any stories you want to share or anything that's been really impactful as far as feedback that you've gotten since you started this endeavor.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say I had pulled up a couple of emails from when we first launched. So our very first episode, we did get some really good email responses. We had people saying, like I'm reading this one, it says, "This is very, very good. I loved Sister Bernie's podcast. I shared it with people. Just listen to the podcast. Great job." I'll admit, when I saw something that was 30 minutes long, I didn't think I'd have the time for this. Then started listening, got captivated, and listened to the entire episode. So, I mean, just, little things like that. I think those have been, and especially for us, those have been, the best things to hear. When people share on social media, that's always really great because, if you share it, then it gets to your friends, and that's how we start reaching those audiences.
I'd like to share one really nice story. So we did an episode for October 7th, which is the feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. It is ties to our Dominican family, so that was one of the reasons we did it. And our guest was Sister Jean Patrick Earhart, who coordinates transportation for the sisters here at the Mother House. And as a sideline, she makes these very beautiful rope rosaries. And so that podcast launched on October 7th, and we offered people, if they wanted one of Sister Jean Patrick's rosaries, that they could let us know and that she'd send one to them. Well, I talked to her yesterday at lunch. She had one person who wanted 50 rosaries because they want to distribute them to everybody in their retirement home. Another person reached out, a graduate of one of our high schools, whose husband is very ill with cancer. And she just knew that he would be consoled to know that one of the Dominican sisters who taught him in high school made the rosary that he had to pray with for his last days. I mean, how much more do you want? That's the kind of
sweet
engagement we want, right?
Yeah, that's a great story. A couple of questions. Do you guys outline your podcasts for planning purposes, or do you script them in any way? Jeremiah, maybe that's for you, or Sister Beth, go ahead.
You want to start, Jeremiah?
Yeah. We don't actually like script too many of them, like not scripted. Like we'll give our guests the questions ahead of time, and we will sometimes have podcasts that we know we want to do as far as like a topic, and we all sit down and talk about it, and then we just record the podcast and launch it. But it's not too scripted. It's just genuine, regular conversations that we try to have. Other than the questions that we get to them ahead of time, it's all like in one take type thing.
I think that there's one thing that we do that does contribute to our success. Jeremiah and I usually have at least a brief conversation before each episode. And we kind of outline, how do we get from the intro to the show into the topic? And I think, Jeremiah, you can correct me if you think differently, but for me, the things that work best are the episodes where Jeremiah has a personal relationship with the sister. For example, there's a short episode that Sister Lori Kirchman did on Liturgy of the Hours. All right, listen to the intro of that. I started by saying, to Jeremiah, "How well do you know Sister Lori?" And he said, "Well, I don't really know her very well at all, but we did pick blueberries together a couple of summers ago." All right, perfect. So when you go to that episode, you will see how we discussed how Jeremiah would use that connection with Sister Lori to get into the topic. And to tell you the truth, I think that was one of our most successful segues it was engaging for the listeners, and I'm sure it kept them attentive through the podcast. So we do things like that occasionally, and I'll occasionally shoot Jeremiah website links or video links to things that I think would be good background for him as we're going into the topic. And he usually has time to listen through those, and that contributes to his preparation.
Absolutely. That's always good. That's why I was listening to your podcast this morning. Another question is, do you have like a set length that you try to aim for? Do you guys have, or have you figured out like this is the best length for our audience, whether that's 30 minutes or an hour? If you're tracking that sort of thing where people kind of jump off and stop listening, or do you just go with the conversation and that's how long it is?
Yeah, it's definitely in the moment. I think like Jeremiah said that having genuine conversations are the main thing that makes it entertaining for all of us, and to hear the real things that come from it. So sometimes they have a natural conclusion that's quick, and like the Sister Lori thing, I think it's only 15 minutes long, but it's pretty concise, and you hear a lot in it, and it's really great. And some of them are longer, and they are full of information, and editing for the editing, all of them have been edited down. We go for as long as it's necessary to get the stories out, and any story really, but we really want to try to, depending on a topic or the individual and the relationship that Jeremiah has with the sister or the associate.
I'd like to piggyback on what Aaron just said. One of our challenges, and I think we're getting there, is to be well enough prepared for the podcast that we make Aaron's editing job easy. So we don't always do that, and sometimes he's got quite intricate editing work to do. And our goal is not to have him have to do that, because that's time and money, right? And I know he loves to do it, but we would really rather that he didn't have to spend a lot of hours doing that. So how can we make that happen? I think there's several things that need to happen for that. The guests have to be well prepared. They have to know where we're going with the show. We have to be well prepared and make sure that we know the direction that we want the interview to go, right? And generally, I talk in advance with the guests to try to get them as comfortable as I possibly can. Then we have that conversation again before we hit the record button, just to review right before we begin. And that seems to help. And then Jeremiah has learned, I think, to do this wonderful thing. The sisters are always nervous when they start. So when he starts, he always says to the sister, now, you might be nervous at the beginning, and that is okay. You are going to become more relaxed as the show goes on, and you'll find that it's a lot of fun. And I think when he says that to them, they do relax immediately, and we do have fun. And that, hopefully that comes through. You get the personalities of our guests.
That's awesome. It's always good to calm down the guest. A couple of questions. Jay, I'm going to save your question for the end. I think that's a really good question for the end. So Nancy's question is, with racial equity being so important with your community and your organization, are you going to be addressing that topic going forward, and how will you handle that?
Yes, we are. It's a matter of scheduling our guests. That's been a bit of a challenge. So we haven't done one of those yet, but it's absolutely on the table. And we have, if any of you are familiar with our work, we have an anti-racism team that is composed roughly of 20 of our sisters and 20 persons of color who are our partners. And they're names of people you would know who they are. They're prominent members of Springfield who are deeply committed to us and to the work of anti-racism, who are really pros in this area. And that's why it's so hard to schedule them. So we're working on that.
That's great. We'd like to hear from each of you what your favorite podcast is that you listen to. So you can't use the one that you create. So give us a different podcast that you like to listen to.
I'll probably start us out. My favorite podcast to listen to is $1 Million Worth of Game. They interview a lot of people on there. They have, well, I don't want to say interview, but they have podcasts with a lot of people on there, a lot of celebrities. You just kind of get a chance to know them, without the fame, who they are as people. So I'm really into that one.
Veronica, you want to go?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I just recently, my latest favorite podcast, it's Nonprofit Nation with Julia Campbell. She just is, I've always loved her stuff, and now as a podcast, it's just like even better. So
I have too many. The one I listen to most often is On Being with Krista Tippett. She's been at it a long time. I am blown away by Magna Chakravarti's skills. So I love On Point. I love The Splendid Table. I often listen to that when I'm cleaning the house. And Code Switch is one that I go to for specific things, and especially regarding our anti-racism work.
And me, I've been listening to quite a few, but one I'm really interested in lately. I was trying to find it here, but I know it's from Block Club Chicago, and that's the main group, and so I know it's just one of those things that's pretty interesting. And they're a nonprofit that has their own journalism going on in the city. And there's Now and Then with Heather Cox Richardson. That one's pretty new, but it's really great. And there's quite a few others, but there's been some really great ones over the years. And yeah, I think I'm seeing other ones pop up here. Yeah.
Yeah, she's putting them on the
Oh,
chat.
yeah.
I love that you're doing that. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Jeremiah, I couldn't remember yours. So if you want to type yours in there for people.
I'm also going to share this little thing here just for hosting.
Yeah.
We use Podbean, and there's quite a few other ones. And in the little handout that will probably be distributed, you can have a little more information on that. But we found that Podbean really works for us really well. It moves things along pretty quickly. And I think maybe Veronica wants to talk. I don't know, I'm going to throw something at you, but you notice that the show notes really get people engaged.
yeah, so we built a separate website. Okay, so when you have Podbean, it creates a website for your podcast. It's only so much customizable. You can only do so much with it. So we decided to go ahead and build a separate website. So it's flowcastlisten.org, which we can embed all of our podcast episodes on there. And then, yeah, we do what are called show notes. So it's, kind of a little recap or intro about the episode. We provide we link to resources that may have been mentioned. So like if, when Sister Beth mentioned the We Are Eagles book, then we'll link to that book, things like that. We'll link to other blog posts and things like that on our Springfield OP website. So it's just a really good way to, just kind of keep everybody engaged with different content that you've created.
That's really helpful. And I personally love show notes because I do like, what was that book that they said? And then I have to go back and find it sometimes, like in the time of it. But I see you guys are putting some notes in there. I love your social handle is in there. Does anyone else have any other questions, or you can tell us maybe any advice that you might have that we haven't already discussed? If someone was going to start a podcast for their organization, or any other like little tidbit that would be helpful?
Yeah, actually, there was one thing that I definitely wanted to touch on. I would say especially what I've noticed so far in our success, I would say email has been the best thing that's worked for us. So we've branded Flowcast as a separate entity, but it does, you know what I mean? It still does fall under the Dominican Sisters of Springfield. So it's good to just kind of like keep that connection. Remember that you already do have an established audience. One thing I've made sure to do in all of our emails, anytime I mention or link to Flowcast, then I always make sure that that link is a click segment. So that means if anybody clicks that link, then they're automatically segmented to the Flowcast distribution list. So that's just kind of a good way, you know what I mean? As people are showing that they're interested by clicking on a link, then they get added to the list that goes out weekly, you know, and they get those podcast reminders. So it's a good way to kind of keep your initial audience, keep them engaged throughout the year.
So for that, do you have a CRM of some sort, or are you just putting those into the Podbean system?
We use Constant Contact for all of our emailing. So yeah, I do everything, all of our newsletter and episode distribution, all of that goes through Constant Contact.
And we use that because it's integrated with the donor software that we use too. I think you might actually, if you're not interested in that aspect, if you don't have a mission advancement office, there are probably some others that might work better for you, but Constant Contact is what we use. I see Nancy asked the question about the name, and we did not talk about it. For the Life of the World is the tagline that we sisters have been using. It's in its Latin form in the beautiful mosaic that's in our convent chapel, Pro Mundi Vita, that Jesus gave his life for the life of the world, and our sisters' lives are meant for the life of the world. And actually, when we started, that was going to be the name of the podcast. We were going to call it For the Life of the World. Well, enter Veronica, and she was working on some marketing designs, and she said, well, what if we change that a little bit to Flowcast? And we all loved it immediately. Now you notice that we use it as an acronym, and there's periods in there. We need to do that for branding purposes. There are, and if you go to your Apple podcast host and just type in Flowcast, you will see that there are a ton of podcasts by that name. Now, maybe if we had known that, we wouldn't have chosen it, but in reality, none of them are anything like ours. And so we think we're pretty safe in that regard. Oh, it looks like some people have noticed that.
Yeah, I did that this morning, actually. I just tried to search Apple and it didn't come up. And I was like, oh, well, I'll go to their website. And then I did click back to Apple from your website.
Yeah. So, and we had quite the time deciding what our URL for our website would be. Veronica and I went back and forth a lot on that because we could not use just Flowcast. And I think we settled on a pretty good one, flowcastlisten.org.
Very good. Well, those are all the questions I have. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can turn your videos back on if you want to ask a question. And we want to thank the Dominican Sisters team for joining us today. We appreciate your time. I personally have learned a lot, so I thank you so much for that. Jeremiah, that's a great question. What's your career path now that you, so I listened to the interview with you and Aaron, just the two of you talking, and I heard that you were a custodian originally at the Dominican Sisters, is that right? Or did you start in the kitchen? So where do you see yourself going now? You obviously have a lot of career shifting to do here.
I'm listening, Jeremiah.
Well, I actually, like, this is the way I can put it. So never stay somewhere for too long if you're not sure you're gonna be fully committed to that. So I started out in the kitchen and I was a teenager, so it was just, you know, just work for me. I didn't look at it as a career or anything. And then they had housekeeping full time, and I started to grow up a little bit. So I said, yeah, you know, I need full-time pay. And and then I was talking to Aaron, and then Flowcast came about. But now that I've been doing this podcast, yes, it actually has gave me some insight on this can be a career. I can really, learn a lot while doing Flowcast. But if I go get an education with it, the sky's the limit. So, never really look too far into your future. Just live life day by day, and you never know what'll pop up and change your mind. So
You might have a career in PR with that answer, sir.
He might.
Sister Beth, any closing comments from you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been delightful to be with you. A lot of fun for all of us, I think. And if you have any suggestions, constructive criticism to offer us, ideas for shows, if you think we can be of any help as you're getting ready to launch your own, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.